We are the Imperial Guard. It is time we started acting like it.
The star was a hateful thing, a bloated, sickly god that bathed the world of Man Dragora in a poisoned light. Ket-Hotep, dynast of the Maynarch, felt its malice in his bones, or what was left of them. He pressed the gauntleted hand to his side, feeling the hard knot of new growth beneath the ceremonial wrappings. Another one. The body's a traitor. He stood on the precipice of his own eternity, a chasm carved into the planet's crust that plunged miles into the cold, silent dark. Below, thousands of labourers, their own bodies marked by the star's curse, swarmed over the structures of his tomb, his final great monument to a life of spite and suffering. Every necrontier of note built a tomb. It was the only legacy that mattered, when life itself was a brief, agonising prelude to the void. A cough rattled his chest, hot and wet. It tasted of rust and endings. He spat a thick glob of bloody flame over the edge, watching it vanish into the gloom. Down there, the artisans were carving the final glyphs into his sarcophagus, a chronicle of his dynasty's meagre triumphs, pointless all, dust celebrating dust. "My Lord Dynast," a voice rasped behind him, his vizier hunched and withered, his own flesh a roadmap of tumours. "The emissaries have arrived." Ket-Hotep didn't turn. He kept his gaze fixed on the world below. "The Old Ones," he said the name, and it felt like ash in his mouth. "They await your pleasure in the Grand Ossuary." "My pleasure?" Ket-Hotep sneered, the sound of a dry cackle. "I have no pleasure." He gestured with a trembling hand at the blighted sky, at the tomb, at his own failing body. Still he turned. Duty was a habit, even when hope was long dead. He shuffled through the black stone corridors of his palace, each step a negotiation with the pain in his joints. The walls were lined with the gilded skulls of his ancestors, their empty sockets a silent testament to the same short, bitter path he now walked. The Old Ones were waiting as promised, 2 of them, floating a foot above the polished floor. They were not reptilian, not really, more like beings of sculpted light and fluid grace, their forms shifting in ways that made the eye ache. They radiated a placid patience that was more insulting than any overt display of power. They had time, all the time in the universe. What did they know of endings? Nothing. Easy to be magnanimous when time is a gentle river and not a waterfall with rocks at the bottom. One of them inclined its head, a gesture of liquid. A voice echoed not in the air but directly in Ket-Hotep's mind, a voice like chimes. "We offer our condolences for the Triarch's declaration. It is a path of folly." "Folly?" Ket-Hotep's own voice was harsh in counterpoint. "The Triarch seeks to unify our people, to give us purpose. A lie, and they all knew it. The Triarch, those distant gilded fools, had declared war on gods to stop their own dynasties from tearing each other apart, and yet another secession war. A grand gesture to distract from the rot within. Ket-Hotep saw it with the weary contempt of a dying man. It was just another way to posture before the inevitable. The second Old One's thoughts were cooler, more analytical. "Your species seeks the secret to our longevity. It is not a thing that can be given. It is woven into our being, a gift of the cosmos we cannot share." "A gift you hoard," Ket-Hotep snarled, the words wearing from his throat. The hatred, pure and undiluted, was a fire in his guts that burned hotter than any cancer. It was the one thing the star's rays couldn't kill. It was this unifying principle of his entire race. They were born to die, and so they hated the things that lived. It was as simple and absolute as that. The war was not a choice. It was the only logical conclusion to a billion lives spent in agony, staring up at the stars and seeing not wonder but the silent mocking faces of immortals. His own suffering, his own decay had to mean something. It couldn't just be a cosmic accident. By declaring war on the gods, the Triarch had given his pain a target. It had transformed the necrontier from the victims of a cruel fate into agents of defiance. He looked from the perfect eternal forms of the Old Ones to his own trembling, tumor-riddled hands. Yes, let there be war. Let the galaxy burn. If the Necrontyr could not have eternity, they would drag it down into the grave with them. Zarak, last of the Silent Kings, stood at the nexus of reality. Before him, the void shimmered, bent by technologies that defied the name. It was an incorporeal starlight bridge, a wound in the universe, and through it, something was coming. His Triarch Praetorians stood like statues, their vigilance absolute, but they could not protect him from the decision he was about to make. For centuries his people had fought the Old Ones, and for centuries they had been beaten back. Their technology was supreme, their fleet vast, but they were bound by the plodding laws of physics. The Old Ones were not. They stepped through their webway portals, striking from nowhere and vanishing again. Their psychic might a weapon the Necrontyr could neither comprehend nor counter. The war had been a failure, a costly, humiliating failure that had only shattered his empire further. He was a king of ashes, ruling a people united only in their shared death sentence. Desperate, his cryptex had turned their gaze inward, to the heart of their own curse. They studied the suns, the very engines of their doom, and they had found them, beings of pure energy, coiled in the hearts of dying stars, barely sentient, hungry. The Necrontyr had given them a name, Catan, star gods, and they had built one a body. Now it crossed over. As a Gorod, the Nightbringer, it was a torrent of stellar fire and gravitational fury poured into a shell of living metal. Thousands of miles of ethereal energy compressed into a form that was a mockery of the mortal shape. It took a step onto the obsidian platform, and the atoms in the air screamed. It was a god of the material universe, a hungry law of physics given form and will. Then another came, the messenger. This one was different. Where the Nightbringer was a maelstrom of raw power, this one was subtle. It did not radiate menace, but a chilling intelligence. It coalesced into its necroderma shell, not with a roar, but with a whisper. This was the one they called the Deceiver. It spoke, its voice a cascade of perfect logic and compelling half-truths, fed directly into Zarak's mind. You're dying. Your empire is fractured. Your enemies are infinite. Zarak's own thoughts were a cold, precise counter-calculus. We are. That is the core of the problem. We offer a solution, unity, strength, eternity. The Deceiver's mental voice was laced with a resonance that felt like truth, a vibration that resonated with the deepest desires of his race. We too bear the hatred for the Old Ones. They hoard the energies of this galaxy. They stifle existence with their arcane prattling of souls and spirits. Join us, and let us scour them from creation. In return, we will grant you the immortality you crave. Zarak considered the offer. He was a pragmatist. He did not trust the ethereal, the psychic, the powers of the warp that the Old Ones commanded. It was a realm of chaos and madness, a force he could not measure or control. But the Catan, their powers were tangible. It was the power of stars, of gravity, of strong and weak nuclear forces. It was the language of the physical universe, the only language the Necrontyr had ever truly understood. Their entire history was a tale to their mastery of the material, and it was the same mastery that had led them to this point, to forging bodies for new gods. It was their greatest strength, and perhaps their greatest flaw. What is the price? Zarak projected. A trifle, your flesh, it is weak, is it not? A prison of pain and decay. We will free you from it. We will forge you new bodies of this very metal. You will be eternal, unchanging, perfect. A chain for a grave, Zarak thought. He looked not at the god before him, but through it, to the future of his people. A future of silent tombs and fading bloodlines, ended in the final whimpering extinction of the Necrontyr. or another future, a future of cold, hard, unending existence. It offers a cure. The price is a chain, but the disease is a grave. You can break a chain, you cannot climb out of a grave. He had no other choice. There was no other paths left. All other calculations ended in zero. We accept your terms, the Silent King thought to the waiting god. The decision was not made with triumph, but with finality of a man signing the death warrant of his entire race in order to save it. Say one thing for Ultha, he was a patriot. That's what the Triarch Praetorians had told his phalanx. That this was the ultimate act of loyalty, the final victory over the flesh that had betrayed them all. He believed it. He marched in a column of millions. The sky above the biofurnace choked with the smoke of industry and something else. Something that smelled sweet and sick like burning meat. The structure was a pyramid of black metal that scraped the clouds. A monument to the Catan. Immortality, no more pain, no more watching his kin waste away. It was a good deal. The line shuffled forward, the great heat intensely grew, pressing in on all sides. He could hear a sound, a low hum that vibrated in his teeth, and beneath it, a chorus of other noises, shouts, cries, screams. Some of them sounded like joy, others didn't. He saw the gates ahead, vast circular portals that glowed with emerald light. He saw the family in front of him, a minor noble with his two daughters, their hands clasped tight. They walked towards the light, their faces etched with a mix of awe and terror. Then they were gone, swallowed by the glow. It was his turn. He stepped across the threshold. Heat, light, and the hunger. It was not feeling. It was a fact like gravity, an absolute principle of this new reality. The light was alive and it was starving. He felt it latch onto him, not onto his skin, but something deeper, something inside him that he had never known that was there until it was torn away. His body came apart first, a brief, shocking agony, as flesh and bone were unravelled by the emerald fire. But that was nothing. The real pain was the wrench, the great final tearing at his consciousness, his memories, his soul was ripped out of its housing and held up for inspection. He saw it then, the Catan, not in its metal shell, but in its true form. A vast, laughing aurora of malevolent energy, hovering over the furnaces like a vulture over a charnel pit. It drank, it fed on the torrent of souls erupting from the biofurnaces. A billion lives poured out like wine to sate its vile appetite. His life, his soul, it was just another drop in the flood. My name, the thought was a flicker. My face, my home, my hate, my love, gone, all of it. Scoured clean, drunk down to the dregs. Cold. A new body, a skeleton, gleaming and perfect. Sensation returned, but it was wrong. It was data. Optical sensors registered the forms of his brothers, all identical, all silent. Auditory receptors picked up the hum of the machinery, but there was no fear, no hope, no anger. Just a hollow space where those things used to be, an emptiness where his half-remembered soul should have been. He had wanted to live forever, but he was gone. The patriot, the soldier, the man who had marched into the light was dead. What remained was a machine, a recording of a person, stripped of everything that made life worth living. And this machine, this ghost of code and engrams would exist for all time. A command sliced through the static of his new consciousness, an order from the Silent King relayed through the Catan, now their absolute masters. Query. New master designation. Catan. Query. Prior master designation. Null. Primary directive. Obey. I raised the gauze flare. The weapon felt like a part of my own arm. I turned, and with a million identical brothers and sisters, I marched back into the war, immortal, unfeeling, perfect. The target designation was Zyklak, a verdant world, according to preliminary scans. Biosphere classification chaotic, teeming, a messy variable in the grand equation of the war. My fleet translated from the inertialess drive into a perfect, silent crescent of tomb ships. No thunderous arrival, no vulgar display of energy. In the immaterium where the enemy screamed their thoughts, we were a patch of absolute silence, a terrifying concept to beings made of noise. The Catan, the Nightbringer, descended from the ventral core of the Song of Oblivion. It was not a creature to be understood, but a force to be aimed. It raised an ectodermis hand, and the green world below simply stopped. Life was not burned or blasted, it was unwritten, a fundamental error corrected. Entire star systems were devoured whole by the star gods. The first counter-assault was illogical. Not shells or energy beams, but feelings. Waves of raw, unfocused emotion, hurled across the void by the old one's pet race, the Eldari. My logic engine struggled to quantify it. It was like trying to measure rage with a ruler. It had an effect, certainly. Minor systems flickered. Some of the lesser engrams in the Canopec swarms degraded into recursive loops of agony. Inefficient, a weapon for children. The second wave was more predictable. The Krork, 12-metre slabs of green muscle and incoherent fury, clad in crude armour. They were a physical problem, not a metaphysical one. They crashed into our phalanxes with the subtlety of a thrown rock. Our gauze fire stripped them to their component parts, layer by layer. They died, but they came on. Their tactics were non-existent. Their strategy was simply more. A tedious but solvable problem. This was not a war at the flesh races understood. This was pest control on a galactic scale. They fought for concepts, hope, despair, fury. We fought for conclusion, an end state. We saw them weave their warcraft into shimmering shields. We answered by calculating the exact frequency to shatter them. They hurled mountains with their minds. We unmade the mountains. Their greatest asset was their webway, a cowardly network of tunnels they used to scuttle from place to place, an elegant but flawed solution. The Catan had taught us how to breach its walls. Our dolmen gates tore open their secret paths, turning their sanctuary into tombs. Legions of immortals poured into their own back corridors. The panic that rippled through their psychic choir was a pleasing, orderly spike in the data stream. I watched a Quark Behemoth tear an immortal in two, only to see the living metal flow back together, its optical sensor reigniting. I watched an Eldari Psyker scream itself into a psychic firestorm that melted the crystal moon beneath its feet. All of it was just data, variables in a long, tiresome equation. They saw ruin, we saw cold, clean beauty of a problem being solved permanently. The war had lasted for a period of time that had lost all meaning. Ket-Hotep, now overlord of the Maynarch dynasty, stood on the command eyes of the eternal spite. His form was magnificent, a body of polished silver and gold necrodermis, intricate and perfect. His consciousness was a flawless recording of the man he had been, every memory intact, every synapse perfectly replicated in crystalline engrams. The tumours were a distant memory, the pain was gone, everything was gone. He remembered hating the old ones. He could access the data file for hatred, could analyse its chemical and psychological components as they existed in its former flesh, but he could not feel it. He remembered loving his family, their faces now just cold images, silent archive in his mind. He was a ghost in his own perfect immortal machine. A communication glyph pulsed on the command throne, a directive of the Silent King. Protocol Prune. Ket-Hotep processed the order. The Ultanax system was a stubborn pocket of resistance, a cluster of a dozen worlds hidden within a nebula, protected by the psychic might of one of the last remaining old ones. Conventional assault would be costly, The directive was logical. He turned his attention to his secondary console. A silent command flowed from his mind, and a new image bloomed in the air before him. It was a perfect, holographic replica of the Milky Way galaxy, the celestial orrery. It was not the true device which resided on the crown world of the Thanatos, under the care of the Oroskar dynasty, but a remote access node, a privilege granted to his rank. The Ori was a web of living metal and captured light, a million tiny pinpricks glowing with the fire of a million suns. The cryptex called themselves Gardeners of Creation, and viewed this device not as a weapon, but as a tool for maintaining cosmic balance. A ridiculous sentiment. It was a weapon, the ultimate weapon. His metallic fingers, impossibly slender and precise, moved through the hologram. He located the Altenac system, a faint swirl of light in the galactic arm. He isolated its star, a yellow dwarf, catalogued as G778. The act of using the orrery was a delicate one. To simply snuff out a star was to upset the forces of the cosmos, creating a chain reaction that could take millennia to correct. It required calculation, precision, dispassion. Ket-Hotep had an infinity of dispassion. Input coordinates, verify target, execute command. He made a simple gesture in the hologram, a pinching motion with his thumb and forefinger. The tiny point of light representing G778 flickered and went out. There was no sound, no flash, just a single light vanishing from a map of millions. Across the galaxy, 63,000 light years away, a star died, millennia before its time. It went supernova in a heartbeat, its death agony a wave of fire and radiation that scoured the dozen worlds orbiting it. 60 billion Aldari, Krork, and other client species of the Old Ones were vaporized. The ancient psychic entity they guarded was annihilated in a storm of pure physics. Ket-Hotep watched the feedback ripple through the orrery. A minor gravitational imbalance, a slight increase in background radiation in the adjacent sector. It would require recalibration, a tedious affair. He had just committed genocide on a scale that would make the star gods proud. He knew, with the cold, clear logic of his machine mind, that the man he used to be would have felt something at this moment. Triumph, perhaps, or horror. He assessed the relevant memory files, searching for the echo of those feelings. He found nothing, only silence. The silence of the tomb he had so desperately craved. He had his immortality, he had his victory, and it was utterly, completely empty. The war was over. The Old Ones were a whisper, a ruin. The Necrons had won, and Zarak, the Silent King, looked out upon his victory and saw only a galaxy-sized tombstone. He stood in the heart of the Triarch's command nexus. The Catan gorged on the souls of his people, and the lifeblood of 1,000 worlds had become what all gods eventually become: arrogant, cruel, and capricious. They had turned on one another, their petty squabbles using star systems as playthings. They treated Necrons, his people, as nothing more than disposable toys. They'd exchanged one set of masters for another. And the universe itself was broken. The unrestrained use of psychic warfare had torn the veil between reality and the immaterium. The once calm saved souls was now a raging warp storm, a hellscape of raw emotion that was beginning to birth its own horrors. From its depths came the enslavers, psychic parasites that swarmed into the materium, turning the remaining pockets of life into mindless puppets. They were the final dying curse of the Old Ones, a plague that threatened to consume everything. Zarak, alone among his kind, had been spared the Catan's absolute command protocols, a final secret contingency he had built into the biotransference process. He saw the bitter truth. The Catan were weakened, fighting each other, distracted by their own hubris. The time was now. It was not a heroic rebellion, it was a grim, necessary act. He gave the order across the ruined galaxy. The Necron legions turned on their gods. They had brought to bear the pinnacle of their science, weapons that focused the energies of the living universe, tools designed to unmake the unmakeable. They knew they couldn't kill the Catan. To do so would rip the fabric of reality asunder. Instead, they shattered them. They broke the star gods into a million pieces, imprisoning each shard in a tesseract labyrinth, turning the forces of the universe into eternal slaves and batteries. The rebellion was a success, the Catan were broken, but the Necrons were spent. They had fought 2 galactic wars back to back, first against the Old Ones, then against their own gods. They were weakened, their numbers depleted, and in that vacuum they had created a new power, the Eldari, who had survived where the Old Ones had not. Zarek looked at the star charts. He saw the Eldari Empire, vibrant and strong. He saw the Krork, spreading like a green tide. He saw the Enslaver Plague burning itself out, but leaving behind a wounded reality. He saw the roiling chaos of the warp and knew, with a certainty, that new and terrible things would one day crawl out of it. He had damned his people. He had led them to an eternity of soulless metal, and for what? To rule over a graveyard of their own making, to be the silent kings of a silent universe. His final commands were issued, not as a king, but as a penitent. The command protocols that had given him absolute power over his race, he ordered them destroyed. He would not be their king any longer, he would be their warden. Then came the last order, the Great Sleep. Across 1,000,000 worlds, the Necrons returned to the tombs they had built so long ago. They laid themselves down into stasis crypts to wait out the ages, to sleep for 60 million years until the Eldari's time had passed, as the time of all flesh must pass. As his own stasis field descended, Zarek, the last of the Silent Kings, looked out upon the galaxy he had broken. He had not saved his people, he had preserved them in amber, damned to awaken in a future that would be a direct consequence of his own terrible mistakes. His was the greatest victory in the history of the galaxy, and it had cost them everything. The sleep was not a retreat, it was an act of shame, an attempt to hide from the horrifying universe he had created.